The top business stories live from the Sky newsroom. A shock fall in inflation puts it lower than the Bank of England's target for the first time in 3 years. We'll assess what it means for pensions, benefits and interest rates. Also today, why YouTube bosses are calling for the platform's creators to be given a greater voice. Very good morning. Welcome to the programme. This is Business Live with me, Darren McCaffrey. We're going to start, of course, with that big news today, and that is that UK inflation has seen a surprise fall, leaving it below the Bank of England's target for the first time in more than 3 years. According to the Office for National Statistics, the CPI measure of inflation fell to 1.7% in September. Now, that's lower than most economists were predicting, and it's down from the 2.2% we saw in August, and below, of course, the government or the Bank of England's target of around 2%. And as you can see, that inflation is now well below the figure that it was in April 2021. The fall over the last month or so, mainly due to lower airfares and petrol prices.
Well, look, it's good news for family finances that inflation has fallen below 2%. But of course, there's more work to be done to protect working people and bring stability and growth back to the economy, which is what the Chancellor and this government is doing now and in the run-up to the budget at the end of October.
Well, let's go to central London now. Join our business and economics correspondent, Paul Kelso. Very good morning to you, Paul. Ultimately, this is some good news.
It is, I think, unequivocally for consumers. They'll probably all have already have noticed that while around £1.30 something a litre of fuel is still expensive, it's less than it was, and that is the biggest driver of the downward inflation below the Bank of England's target. As you've explained, it's been falling fuel prices. Also, airfares, that's slightly misleading, as anyone who's tried to book a flight recently would know. It's not misleading, but it's a statistical quirk. There was a big increase back in August 2023. These are annual figures, so we look at the September number. It's flattered slightly by that, but nevertheless, the figures are down. And it's got some knock-on effects. The first one we should talk about is the Bank of England monitoring inflation closely. It's been slow, not bringing down rates as quickly as many would like. One reduction so far, a pause at the last meeting, because they've been looking at core inflation. That's if we strip out the volatile elements, including fuel, food, energy prices and the like. Core inflation actually fell in these figures to 3.2%. So that's the sort of lingering effects of the big inflation spike, the impact on increasing wages. Well, some of that's starting to fall away. That, the markets think, will give the Bank of England almost no excuse not to cut rates at its next meeting in November. That's now a 90% chance, the markets put it, that there'll be at least a 0.25 percentage point cut. Other implications for pensions. Pensioners, good news, more than £470 a year up rating, because this inflation figure is part of the triple lock, because the figure is lower than the wage inflation we heard about yesterday. That means pensioners will get that money. They'll be more generously treated than those receiving universal credit, because September's inflation number is what sets the rate for the rise in universal credit, 1.7%, which might actually look a bit skinny by the time it comes in to force next April, because this inflation number, while good and ahead of expectation, is expected to get worse. The inflation is expected to increase as we get in to the latter part of the year and into the new year. But for now, good news, welcomed by the government, welcomed by the Bank of England, welcomed by most of us at the till.
Indeed, certainly. What impact, though, on the budget, Paul? We've heard over the last 24 hours or so lots of speculation that apparently there's a 40 billion gap that the government's going to need to plug, if you like, in this budget. What impact potentially might these inflation figures have on that government assessment?
Well, lower inflation is good news for government departmental spending as well as it is for consumer spending, because everything should, if not get cheaper, certainly not be getting more expensive. As government spending's been impacted by inflation, of course. Hospitals, schools, they have all got bills to pay, just like consumers have. There's an impact of falling interest rates and the cost of borrowing. That's down already this morning. As a consequence, if rates start to fall, the cost of the government's huge debt interest bill, well, that should start to come down too. So that'll ease things, perhaps more than just at the margins. It adds to the sense that the economic wind, the wider economic weather, is improving. We've seen the economy, GDP backing growth, wage inflation slowing, and inflation falling all in the last week. So that's the economic picture. What it doesn't do is remove the enormous cloud over the public finances. That 40 billion figure you mentioned, half of that we can account for as the £22 billion black hole that Rachel Reeves says she discovered. That's in this year's finances. But even for public departmental spending in public services to stand still, even before that black hole was discovered, was going to take £20 billion of tax rises, according to the Institute for Fiscal Studies, because the spending plans penciled in by the last government are simply not credible, given the committed spending required for the NHS, defence and education. So there was always a hole in the public finances. That's still there. That's why what Rachel Reeves does 2 weeks today is so consequential. There is a huge amount of money to be found if public services are to be maintained, spending certainly, in real terms at current levels, and that leads us to tax rises or more borrowing or both.
Paul, thank you as always. Paul Castle there joining us from central London. Let's bring in Victoria Clark now. She is the UK Chief Economist at Santander, Corporate and Investment Banking. Very good morning to you, Victoria. Just pick up on a couple of points that Paul touched upon there. Let's start with this, I think, what's going to turn into a bit of a row in terms of pensioners seeing quite a substantial increase next year, and those on benefits because of today's inflation figures not likely to get anywhere close to that.
Yeah, I mean, look, the inflation numbers are good news, and I think, stepping back from the rows that may be there or may not be there over, the uplifts that we're likely to see on pensions and benefits over the course of the next year. I mean, these aren't numbers to celebrate because we've had inflation above target, running at high rates for such a long period. This is, the first time that we've seen a 1.7 rate since the spring of 2021. And as much as, we're talking about what pay and these uplifts are going to do next spring, I think we've got to focus back on the good news, which is that the pressures that households are facing when they hit the shops, the tills, their wider energy bills, it is not as bleak as it was before. So this is good news, and those political stories should take into this good news into context.
Indeed, though it might be a little bit of a blip in the sense that we are expecting, because of energy, for inflation potentially probably to go up again next month.
Yeah, there certainly will be some upward momentum to energy prices as the Ofgem energy price cap is reset, that's for sure. So that will impact households again. But again, we're not back where we were at the peak. The energy price picture is elevated compared to where it was pre-war in Ukraine, but it is not nearly as awkward as it was before. Prices are rising at a slower pace, and the labour market, as much as it's not as hot as it was earlier in the year, is still doing okay. So actually, we should take heart from the fact that we've got to this position with lower inflation, a decent economic backdrop, and we can hopefully move forward on a more positive footing. And there is, of course, that question about where interest rates go, which looks, almost certainly to be lower again in November.
Well, that's what I was going to ask you next, Victoria, on interest rates. Which camp are you in the sense that you think not just a November, but a potential December rate cut is now very likely?
Yeah, so I would say November is definitely nailed on looking at these numbers. It's difficult to rule out December as well. Again, looking at these inflation numbers, the focus for the Bank of England has not been so much on what number it got today or next month, whether it's 1.7 or 1.8 for a few months, but really, are we going to stay down at these better inflation rates? And the worry still for the Bank of England is this number that it has on services inflation, which was just below 5% today. And that it focuses on because it tells it more about whether inflation is going to stay down at these better numbers. And it's improved, it's come down a bit, but it's still high. So I think the Bank of England is going to be quite cautious. It may decide that it's got enough there to do December again. But, I think that caution, that sense that it really needs some further good progress in these numbers will still be there.
And just very finally, there was criticism, of course, of the Bank of England going into this inflation crisis, if you like, some arguing that they didn't act quickly enough. Do you think they've done much better on kind of the bounce out? They've managed this much better in some degree?
And the bank's been through a big process over the last year, learning the lessons, as have many central banks actually, about their models, their forecasting. And I think that they do have a new framework that's working quite well. That is trying to be forward-looking now, trying to work out what scenario, what path they take is going to reduce the risks the most for them. And so they're looking at data, they're trying to be forward-looking, and I think that will hopefully lead them to be a bit more activist this time around. I mean, that's interesting and important because it also raises the question, when they've got all that data in the bag, whether it's inflation or lower pay, whether they can really start to move with bigger back-to-back rate cuts. So I think it's all coming together for them. They'll be cautious for now, but there is a case to be made for them actually putting rates down more quickly next year.
Interesting stuff. Victoria, as always, thank you very much indeed. That's Victoria Clark there, the UK Chief Economist at Santander's Corporate and Investment Banking, joining us live from the city. Thank you, Victoria. Don't forget, you can get more on this and what it means for you. Just scan that QR code on your screen and you can read more on the inflation fall on our Money block. But let's bring you up to date with some of the rest of the day's business stories now. And global chip stocks have fallen after the semiconductor equipment maker ASML posted disappointing sales forecasts. The company's stock dropped some 16% yesterday when it accidentally published its results a day early, warning of a slower recovery in the semiconductor market. John Lewis is bringing back personal loans for its 23 million customers. It's announced it's partnering with the digital bank Zuppa to give people direct access to loans of between £1,000 and £35,000, with terms ranging from 1 to 7 years. Now, since it launched nearly 20 years ago, YouTube has grown to become the second most visited website in the world after Google, with over 1 billion hours of content consumed daily. According to the video sharing platform, in 2022 alone, its creators contributed some £2 billion to the UK economy and supported apparently some 45,000 jobs. Well, today it's launched a nationwide consultation with those creators in an attempt to give them a greater voice, if you like, within government and the wider industry. I've been speaking to Pedro Pina. He is the head of YouTube in Europe, the Middle East and Africa.
If you go back to 2005, where we uploaded the first video of YouTube, there was no such thing as a creator. Fast forward 20 years, here we are, lots of entrepreneurs who made their life creating content for YouTube, and they became full business owners. They became full entrepreneurs with their own media houses. We believe that we are seeing the emergence of Hollywood 2.0. They have their own studios. They have their own incredibly successful businesses with scale that goes beyond the UK and where they have deep and high reach audiences and deep connection with those audiences. But we believe that the industry overall is not really, the industry is not really seeing them. Is not really considered them as legitimate business. They are not being recognized as they should, as full media houses. And I believe actually that's holding them back. They want to take the next steps. They want to invest more in their careers and their businesses, and they have barriers. They have issues that are pulling them back. We want to reach out to them and understand, where do you see those barriers? Where do you need your help? We hope to bring this evidence back to government and to the industry to help create conditions as part of maybe the government's industrial strategy around the creative industries, to create conditions to help them.
Well, and of course, I don't know if you're aware, we've got a budget here in the UK in the next couple of weeks. I mean, if there's one thing in the immediate term that you'd like to see the government do, what would that be?
Any good entrepreneur needs financial aid. You go to banks, you maybe need a mortgage, maybe you need to have a new space for new studios because your business is expanding. And if you go to any bank or any financial institution just asking for financial aid, your professional category is not recognized. It's not there when you pull it up. And as you know, this is critical to calculate risk and to be able to provide, to be able to get the yes from the financial institution. their professional category is not recognized. This is just one example. You can quickly imagine other examples like that. If we, together with the government, are able to change those rules and give the recognition to this profession, we would take big steps towards helping them.
When we talk about creators, though, that's a very broad church. There are many people on YouTube and indeed elsewhere who are viewed to make content that is divisive, let's put it like that, and it rails into whole areas such as free speech. How do you, as an organisation, work out, which creatives should be represented, which creators should be listened to by the governments, when, as I say, they can be very divisive?
It's a great question. So I go back always to our mission: give everyone a voice and show them the world. But giving everyone a voice means that we welcome different points of view. We celebrate the diversity of points of view in our platform, but we are also very strict about the guidelines we provide to anyone who wants to upload videos into YouTube and what we'll allow to stay in the platform. We have very strict policies around, say, violence, extremism, all sorts of glorification of violence, denialism of conflicts and big events. So the policies, which by the way are public, they can be anyone can actually know what those are. We are very clear about what we allow in the platform and what we make sure we remove it. And then at the same time, what we do is we deploy, with the help of machines and humans and a lot of experts, we deploy a tremendous effort to make sure that we keep the platform safe.
And just while we've got you, just one or two questions, just slightly wider on YouTube, if I may, which is, YouTube's turned into this incredible broadcasting operation in many ways. And I was reading the other day that in America, more people watch, I think, YouTube on TV than they do things like Netflix, for example. How tempted are you? Because we're talking about creators that, many people would think are people sat in their bedrooms or going out and about with phones and cameras. How willing or how much do YouTube want to go into the type of content creation that we normally see from kind of mainstream broadcasters and content maybe like sports?
Well, we're not a broadcaster. We have no intention of becoming a broadcaster. What we want to do, and has been our North Star all the time, is to provide the content users want. So we follow the queue of users. We're seeing, indeed, like you mentioned, not only in the US, but around the world, the fact that users rediscovered the living room. They discovered that they have big screens, which are now connected to the internet. And guess what? What they want to see on the TV screens is actually what they used to see on YouTube, and that's why they love YouTube so much.
If lots of people are increasingly watching content on TV, they, at least in their minds, will think about you as a traditional broadcaster to a degree. And I wonder how that feeds in, just finally, to the US election, which, I'm sure is generating lots of content on YouTube, because lots of people have got pretty strong views on either side. How, again, do you manage that? How much is YouTube part of the narrative on the US election?
We are, as I said, our content is, we have an open platform. We allow anyone that wants, you just have to have a brilliant idea and a camera, and we give you the reach and the possibility to make your voice being heard. We have a strong commitment to make sure that authoritative voices are always raised, especially in sensitive moments. So our partnership with news broadcasters, for instance, and all authoritative publishers that produce high quality content that is incredibly important overall, but especially in incredibly specific moments in time, those tend to be raised in our platform to make sure that people have access to high quality information.
That was Pedro Pinta, one of the top bosses at YouTube, speaking to me a little earlier. Really fascinating is that more Americans are watching YouTube on TV, on traditional TVs, than Netflix. Now, let's have a look at the markets. And the US markets closed down last night, weighed down by a drop in the semiconductor stocks. Chip stocks also depressed markets in Asia's companies such as Tokyo Electron and the Taiwan semiconductor manufacturing company retreated following that news yesterday from ASML that it was seeing a disappointing forecast and possible US export chip controls on AI chips. Meanwhile, in Europe, The Amsterdam-listed ASML and the luxury giants LVMH have also been pretty negative on opening this morning in the continent. Shares in Burberry are equally affected by waning Chinese demand, it seems. As you can see, they're down just over 1% this morning. Here in London, the FTSE is bucking somewhat the European trends on the back of that big fall in inflation and the anticipation of rate cuts up ever so slightly this morning. Talking points include, of course, the big winner, that is Whitbread's, after it's raised its profit guidance. House builders are also benefiting from their increased chance of imminent rate cuts and what it means for them. One of the big builders, house builders there, up, as you can see, 2.69%. And let's have a look at the currencies. Unsurprisingly, that inflation figure and the prospect of interest rate cuts has affected sterling down against the US dollar and the euro today. And finally, let's have a look at the oil price. Is down again a nudge today at just under $74 a barrel. Well, let's bring in Rachel Winter. She's a partner at Killick & Co. and joins us this morning. Very good morning to you, Rachel. Let's start with this issue around the kind of premium market when it comes to goods such as Burberry and others. And the shares are down today. Real concern, particularly in the Chinese markets.
Yeah, so China makes up a very important part of the demand for luxury products. Some reports say it accounts for as much as 30%. So because we've had such a decline in the Chinese economy over the last 3 years, we have therefore seen a decline in the demand for luxury goods. And that is now starting to play out in the share prices of some of these luxury goods companies. We had results from LVMH this morning, which is the world's largest luxury goods company. And in particular, I think the results from the fashion and leather goods division were a bit disappointing. We had been expecting those results to be fairly flat compared to last year. And in fact, they were down about 5%. So I think that's the main reason why we are seeing those shares down this morning. And because this company is the biggest luxury goods company in the world, it does act as a bit of a bellwether for other companies in the same sector. And therefore, we've seen some other share prices coming down too this morning, including Burberry, which does trade on the London market.
Let's talk, though, then about Rio Tinto, because actually it seems kind of reassured about demand from China.
Yes, so we had a production update from Rio Tinto this morning. So this is one of the world's largest mining companies. Now, over half of the company's revenue does come from China, and therefore the shares have been treading water a bit over the last 3 years because of these concerns about the Chinese economy. However, in the company's report this morning, it did have a couple of comments in there suggesting there has been a slight improvement in the Chinese situation. So it did say that the Chinese stimulus that was announced last month has led to a slight pickup in demand and also a pickup in the prices of some of the commodities it produces. So I think that has led to a slight increase in the share price of Rio Tinto this morning. So perhaps a ray of light at the end of the tunnel there.
And let's talk about Whitbread, of course, owns things like the Premier Inn, and it's actually raising its profit guidance. Things seem to be doing pretty well.
Yeah, lovely results here this morning. So this company, it depends on its restaurant division for about 25% of its revenues, and then the Premier Inn makes up the other 3/4 of revenues. The restaurant division has been quite weak, and therefore the company is in the middle of a strategy to move away from that and to focus more fully on the accommodation sector. And that seems to be paying off really well. And this morning, the company has announced an increase to its interim dividend and also a £100 million share buyback. So as a result of both of those things, we have seen a very nice increase in the share price this morning.
And let's just finally touch upon sterling, if we can, in the sense that clearly inflation has had an impact. Sterling's done pretty well this year, but it is down, unsurprisingly, this morning, given the speculation around interest rates against both the dollar and the euro.
Yeah, so we've now got a 90% chance that interest rates in the UK will come down at the meeting in November. And when interest rates come down, that does lead to a weakening of the currency. So unsurprisingly, we have seen a weakening in sterling this morning. Now, because the UK is so dependent on imports, when sterling weakens, it makes those imports more expensive, and that could potentially lead to higher inflation again. So I think the Bank of England has a very difficult job here in terms of balancing where interest rates need to go from here.
Rachel, thank you very much indeed. That's Rachel Winter there joining us from Working with the latest on the markets this morning. We're just going to bring you some breaking news, though, just before midday, and it involves Alex Salmond, of course, the former First Minister of Scotland, who tragically died over the weekend, a titan of Scottish politics. And we can join Conor Gillis now, who's got some details about the repatriation of his body from North Macedonia, of course, where he took that suspected heart attack. Conor, what's the latest you have?
Yeah, the family confirming on Monday that Alex Salmond, a titan of Scottish political life for generations, died of a heart attack. And clearly there have been discussions between the Foreign Office and Scottish Government officials around the repatriation of the former First Minister's body from North Macedonia back to Scotland in order for him to be laid to rest and for people to pay their respects in person to him. There has been discussions between both of those governments. There had been calls from a close friend of Alex Salmond, David Davis, the Conservative MP, for the RAF to get involved and to assist with that repatriation process. Now, the Foreign Office and the Scottish Government are not saying anything official at this stage, but it is the understanding from Sky News that the Scottish Government is now going to charter a private plane in order to assist with taking Alex Salmond back to Scotland. And that follows a request for the RAF to get involved being rejected. That is the understanding we have here at Sky News. Clearly, there are still finer details and logistics to be worked out, but it does look like the final stages of those negotiations and those logistics are nearing an edge. And we understand that the Scottish Government will charter that private plane to take him back.
And Conor, do we have any more details potentially of what type of funeral might take place, in the sense that I suspect a lot of ordinary Scots will also want to pay their tributes and to remember Alex Salmond?
This will be a huge moment for Scottish and UK politics, no doubt. When the late former First Minister of Scotland, the first First Minister of Scotland, Donald Dewar, died, there was a major public funeral attended by the great and good from all walks of British political life. There is some suggestion that in Alex Salmond's case, clearly the details are still being worked out. He isn't even back in the country yet, but there is a suggestion that there will be a smaller private family funeral and then a more wider public memorial further down the line. Again, those details will be worked out in the coming hours and the coming days. The main focus at the moment is getting Alex Salmond's body repatriated to Scotland, and we understand that the Foreign Office has rejected an official request for the RAF to get involved, and the Scottish Government has stepped in.
OK, Conor, thank you very much indeed. Conor Gillis there joining us from Scotland with the latest on that breaking news. The Prime Minister has just left number 10 Downing Street on his way to Prime Minister's Question Time. We have got full coverage of that coming up in just a couple of minutes with Kamali and Sam. Stay tuned to Sky News.